Hey, Asha fans, another episode of Behind the Bench, our interview series with Division One head coaches as the 2024-2025 season rolls around, just starting up in a couple days. Today, we go to Centennial. We go to the West Side. Caleb Drinkhouse, D1 head coach over at Centennial. Coach, how was your summer?
It was good. We had a shorter one, fortunately, because we had a nationals run and everything went later. But it was good, nice and peaceful.
We got a lot to talk about last season. Let's start with it as a whole. What did last season mean to you going through those 20 games? You win 16, you go on, you win the championship at D1 and you go on to nationals like you said. How do you kind of sum up that experience as a whole with that team?
Um, it was a special year. It was good to see the team buy in to what I mean, we had pretty much the same team as the year before with only 3 wins. But there was just a disconnect for whatever reason. But I mean, it was special. It was a very fun run. It was a good to see the kids on a road trip to nationals, and the amount of fun they had there was just, I mean, I can't use the term special enough. It was a memory that everyone will have forever.
You talk about memories. Are there any sort of moments or things that stick in your mind that always come up here and there about last season that you always think of?
Um, there was a kind of a turning point in our season. It was kind of like I don't want to say it was a bad part of the season where we had a one specific player leave the ice in the middle of a game, and took off his gloves and kind of, I'll mention him by name. His name is Colin Farr. But because of that, we had like a meeting, and he was like the final piece of our puzzle. He bought in after that, and all the kids saw that. And it was kind of just after that, we were all systems go, and he became a very big piece of our team.
Colin was one of those seniors on your team. You had over 15 seniors on last year's team, an older team, but you got the job done. And you don't have to go through everybody, but what did those seniors as a whole, that group mean to you, that entire class?
Well, we had 3 of them. Which my first year coaching, I was an assistant on the JV team, 4 years ago, and 3 of those players we won the JV state championship, and 3 of them ended up being on our D1 team last year, with Jack Brown, Steinmiller, and Dax. So that was a special moment, just being able to celebrate that with them. Then you had returning players like Jason Casillas and Chase Kane, who had 3 years of high school hockey that wasn't the greatest for them, and they were able to go out as a champion, which was special for them. Then the list goes on. You have Switchenberg, who can't talk enough about that kid. We don't go as far as we go without him. And then, fortunately for the rest of the league, you have Kate Pareja leaving as a junior to go play juniors. So I know they're probably celebrating about that one.
Pareja had such a special season last year. You talk about Ryan McCaughey and Ryan Gabuya. You have so many players that are leaving, but really had a great and special end to their high school careers. You mentioned it. It was your first year as D1 head coach for Centennial. You win the whole thing. You couldn't have had a better result. Are there any lessons that you learned through your first year as head coach?
You learn a lot. You learn to kind of check your ego at the door. You ask all these players to buy into something. So you're asking them to do the same. And as coaches, a lot of times it's like you're not always telling them what to do. You need to be able to learn from them. I got coached a little bit like by my captain, Switch, where there was one week we had a practice, and I didn't prepare as well as I should have, and he kind of called me out on it, and we talked at accountability. So it's not just the players we're coaching, and you got to be able to learn from everybody and trust your players.
It was a two-way street for you guys between the players and the coaching staff. We mentioned you've had an older team last year, but you also had a few young kids who made a big impact, and 3 of them on your offensive end that are returning. Mark Melissa, who was an assistant captain, Maddox Hoover, Jackson Sealer back. How nice is it to have a couple of returners on a team that's mostly new?
It's good that there's stuff to build off from last season. They can come in and show like this is what our expectation is now. What like coaches we bought into this, and it can work. Um, Fortunately, Jackson Steele got hurt in our evaluation, so we're going to be missing him for a couple of weeks. Um, Maddox Hoover last year was a D2 player that ended up making our roster halfway through the season just because he performed as well as possible. Then Mark Melissa, he knows what I expect out of him being the assistant captain last year and coming into this year.
You're a guy who's had experience coaching at the lower levels, like you said, being the JV coach, winning the state championship. you're going to have a lot of players coming from those lower levels to play in your D1 team this year just because of numbers. What's the biggest change between the different levels of Asha?
Um, everything's speed. Each level you go up, it gets a little faster. Kids tend to get bigger. Physicality ramps up. Um, you just gotta make quicker decisions. It's all about how your hockey IQ. Each level you go up, it's a big difference. That's you just got to be able to adapt.
We mentioned those three players offensively that are returning for you, but in terms of other players who are going to get top 6 minutes, who are going to be scoring goals for you guys, who should we look out for?
Gabrick, he's defense. I don't want to. He's a defense. I think of him as a defenseman, but he wants to play forward, so it's going to be fun to try to figure out where he goes. Um, Defensively, we picked up a couple new players with Elarth and Ethan Shilly, I think is pronounced. I don't know last names well enough yet because there are a bunch of new kids to recognize, and those will be our back end. And then there's a couple new kids up front. Last name Sawinski. He's going to be a complete stud in a few years. So
Is it a different mindset for you as a coach, knowing that you maybe have to do a little bit more teaching this year with that younger team with less experience than last year?
it's definitely different. Last year was pretty much everyone knew what we were doing and we just went with it. This year is going to be we're not going to be able to just outscore teams. We're going to have to win in different ways from back end out. Um, but it can be done. I still think we have a pretty good team this year. It's just going to take some chemistry, get used to some chemistry, and go from there.
You mentioned Jason Gabrick back and defense forward wherever he's going to be playing. You also have another defenseman returning who got a little bit of time at D1 in Terrence O'Sullivan. So he's back as well. And defensively, how do you guys seem like you stack up? You've played 4 seeding tournament games. You've seen them skate a little bit. How do you see your defense adding up?
I think pretty decent. There's a couple kids that are still learning because they were on the D2 team last year, where they were coming up. They made the D1 team this year. We have Sully coming back, O'Sullivan. He gained a lot of experience with that coming up to the national strip with us. He's only getting better every day. So our back end should be fine. Um, just we'll probably go top 4 and then play as physically as possible, block shots, and all the little things.
All the little things are going to be important, but you also have a huge returner in net in Logan Gibbs. He was a junior last year. Chance Taylor moves on through graduation. Let's start with Chance before we get into Logan. You had both of those splitting time between last season and in the playoffs. What did Chance Taylor mean? I know he got the start in the championship game against Notre Dame. So what can you say about him?
I will say I had 2 goaltenders that made it. I wish I could have played them both in the championship game, but it's you flip a coin and they both deserved to play that game. But Chance Taylor was, I will say, the most he was a very prepared goalie. He knew his opponents, and I will say this that Grim Lake breakaway, we had that conversation that night, but the night before the game, and he's like, if he has a breakaway, I know exactly where he's going. And he faced him a ton in the Bobcats, and when he had that breakaway, we were all just looking, and he read it. So
Referencing that breakaway in overtime, Gramlich, I think he had a breakaway from the center line in, and Chance Taylor made a huge save. So you have Logan Gibbs coming back. He has a ton of experience with Centennial. He's been with the program for a couple years now, going into his senior year. How is it having him back? He has a ton of experience and knows how to win.
he only gets better, which is scary because he's probably one of the better goalies in the state of Arizona. Um, he's got a ton of experience. He's got playoff experience now. He's plays travel. Um, we're going to be leaning on him a lot, but it's goaltending's everything, and we have one of the best. So, and he's one of our leaders in the locker room now because he's one of the returners. He's been around the team for a while, and kids are following him.
And that's a great guy to follow, being with the program for a while. He played a lot of hockey last year between Centennial, between going to nationals, and also was on Team Arizona last year through Asha and going to win that in Texas. When you look at your team, I know it's a younger team, but have you named your captains yet? And who are the players that people are looking forward or looking up to in the locker room?
All of our returners, people seem to be looking up to them. Steele's one of them. Even though he's hurt, he's coming to every practice. He's trying to stick around with the team. Mark Melissa is one of the quiet leaders. Maddox Huber's even talking a lot. Gabrick's another one. We have not named a captain yet or an assistant. We're kind of seeing where everyone fills in. I've told some people, I'm like, you got to show me what if you want this, and so it has not been decided yet though.
You go through your 4 seeding tournament games. You guys went 2-1-1 in the 4 games, a couple close ones at that, with a tie thrown in there. How did you see your team through the first 4 games in the seeding tournament from what you can take away?
Our first game, we got blown out by Flagstaff, and I will say it was a combination of 14 players that have never played a game together before, and it was a little worrisome. I'm like, how do we move on from this? And then I think we played Brophy that night and won 5-1. So it was just, we're getting better as we play more together, and that's kind of a challenge. But I think we can compete against anyone.
Coach, you had such a special season last year. I want to end it off with something that's really positive. You told me about it a little bit off air, the thing that's right behind you. Can you tell the viewers exactly what that is and what that means to you?
It's a memory I'll have forever. The D1 team bought a jersey with the 24 on it for the year we won the state championship. They all signed it. Got a little emotional when they gave it to me just because it was a very special moment. One of my favorite quotes that I told the team before the D1 game was, "We win today, we'll walk together forever," and we'll have that forever for the rest of our lives. So
Connections that you'll never lose. Centennial, the defending champions, until February 1st, which will be the date of the championship game this year. Coach, we'll see if we see you there. We'll definitely see you around the rink this year. We thank you so much for taking the time.
thanks for having me.